I recently came across this image scroll animation on the studio's portfolio website. Today, we're going to recreate it in next.js using framer motion. You can grab the starter code in the description. With that, let's jump in. I have the starter code pulled up. We have a full page hero section at the top, and below just a list of these image cards. Now, let's start by updating the styling of these cards to become sticky when we scroll. So here in the card component, I'm just going to go to the parent div, and instead of position relative, we'll change this to position sticky. We also need to define a top position that we want this to become sticky at. So let me just for now set this to say, let's say top of 10 view height. So now if I scroll, the cards now become sticky. Now, just to make this a little bit more dynamic, instead of hard coding these values like 10 view height, I'm going to store this in a variable so we can adjust this dynamically. So here at the top of the component, I'm going to define a variable called vert margin. And for now, let's just set it to equal to 10. And then down here, instead of just setting the top statically like this, I would do this in a style tag. Inside this div, we'll add a style tag. And then here we'll set top to be a string literal, vert margin, view height. So now this achieves for us the same effect. Now we'll also go ahead and dynamically set the height here. So in this case, I'm going to set it to 100 minus 2 times vert margin, view height. And this will just make sure that the image is centered vertically, no matter what height we set. So for example, let's change this to 20 instead of 10. And now everything is half the size. Now let's set up scroll tracking for each of these cards. So first, I'm going to create a ref to keep reference to the container. So const container is use ref, and initial will be null. Then I would attach this ref to the parent div. Now let's set up the use scroll hook from framer motion to track the scroll for us. So I will pull out the scroll Y property from the use scroll hook, use scroll, and we'll pass the target as the container. Now this will tell us what the actual absolute value of the scroll is at any given time. Now we also need to track when each of these cards reach their sticky state, because that will then trigger additional animations that we'll want to start. So for this, we're going to store the max scroll Y of the element, which will correspond to when the sticky state has been achieved. So we'll create a state variable to store this. We'll call it max scroll Y, set max scroll Y, use state, and initially this will be a value infinity. Now to trigger this, we're going to use another framer motion hook to tell us when this card is supposed to reach the sticky state. So we'll say const is in view. We'll use the use in view hook from framer motion, apply it to the container, and we'll pass a couple properties. The first will be margin. This will define the viewport, which we consider to be in view. And I'm going to define this as 0 pixels, negative 100 minus vert margin %, and 0 pixels. And we'll say once is true. So this will only trigger the first time this happens. So this margin configuration corresponds to the top of this card reaching expected sticky state here at the top of the screen. When this is triggered, this is when we want to update the max scroll Y position to define it to whatever the scroll position is at that time. We'll use a use effect for this. So use effect if is in view, then we'll set max scroll Y to scroll Y dot get, so the current value of the variable. And for a dependency, we'll say this will run whenever is in view changes. And let's import use effect as well. So now when we scroll, each card is getting its absolute scroll position stored for when it reaches the sticky state. So now with this set up, we can now track for each card what's the scroll progress after it reaches sticky state. And this is what will help drive the follow-up animations. So here we'll use the onChange listener from the scroll Y motion value. So we'll say scroll Y dot on change. We'll take the current value of scroll Y. And what we'll do is translate the scroll Y to some sort of animation progress value that will correspond to the animations that we do after sticky has been hit. So for now, we'll call this, let's say animation value initially is 1. And we'll say if the current value of scroll Y is greater than the max scroll Y. So if we are already reached the sticky position of the card, then we will update the value of animation value accordingly. So animation value will be, let's say here, mat.max 0, 1 minus scroll y minus max scroll y divided by 10,000. Now, this 10,000 value, this will control essentially the speed of the animations that we'll define shortly. But as you can see here, essentially when we first reach this sticky position, animation value will be set to 1. And then over time, as we continue scrolling, this animation value will progress to 0. And now we can take this animation value and define some animations we want to do here. To make this a little bit more clean, let's store these dynamic styles in another state variable. So we'll call this dynamic styles. Set dynamic styles. And initially, the state will be an object that has two values, one for scale, which will initially be 1, and one for filter, which will be for a blur animation that we'll set. And so now we can go down here, and once we have this animation value, we can update the value of these dynamic styles. So say set dynamic styles. The scale we'll say is the animation value, and the filter will be 1 minus animation value times 100. So what will happen is the scale as we progress will go from 1 to 0, and the filter will go from 0 to 100. So now let's actually attach these to the styles of our card. So here in the style tag, we'll set scale to be dynamic styles.scale and filter to be blur dynamic styles.filter pixels. So now if I refresh the page and I scroll, it reaches a sticky position, and after that, the image starts to scale down and blur out. We have the next image come in, it does the same, and this continues for the rest of the images. So with that, we've finished creating this animation. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And on screen now is another video for you to check out, and I'll see you in the next video.